Public education, the American system. Public education is what, to a great extent, has brought us to our current crisis in America. Public education is the Trojan horse that was brought into our country with the intention of destroying our Christian-based constitutional system of government and our ethical society upon which our culture was established. Therefore, I'm not for limiting the federal control of education, and I'm not for returning control of education to the states. I'm not for public education in any form. Do you realize that there are 55.5 million students in public education this year? And we are paying on average $10,000 to $14,000 per student. That's a grand total of at least $600 billion per year, and it's growing every year. $1/2 of $1 trillion plus. As I stated, I want the federal government out of education altogether. I want the state governments out of education altogether. So what do we really want to do with these schools? I want to see all public schools turned into private educational centers and supported by tuitions and gifts from within their local communities. However, it's not so much the money that is at issue. Although turning that much money back over to our citizens, removing that tax burden from them, would be a great benefit. The real issue, though, as I said, is not money. Though we are just throwing good money at bad education, and as long as there are teacher unions, we will see the trend continued. And with that, the dumbing down of our children until they are completely functional illiterates. No, the real issue is not money, it's control. Horace Mann truly believed that he was delivering to modern man the means to utopian salvation for the American society. This philosophical approach to statist education defines its character as being very messianic, to be sure. E.I.F. Williams quotes Mann as stating that the statist school system was the greatest discovery ever made by man. He wrote, and I quote, "Other social organizations are curative and remedial. This is a preventative and an antidote. They come to heal diseases and wounds. This to make the physical and moral frame invulnerable to them. Let the common school to expand its capabilities. Let it be worked with the efficiency of which it is susceptible. And 9/10 of the crimes in the penal code would become obsolete. The long catalog of human ills would be abridged. Men would walk more safely by day. Every pillow would be more invulnerable by night. Prosperity, life, and character held by a stronger tenure. All national hopes respecting the future brightened." Unquote. Did you listen carefully? Mann says with the development of the public school system, we can resolve 9/10, that is 90%, of all crime in our society in the future. In 2008, there were 1.2 million non-fatal crimes in American public schools. Threats and violent acts against teachers reached 276,700 in those school systems. With the use of illegal drugs, gangs, witchcraft, no ethical teaching based upon any just moral system. Just humanism. Man being his own God. Man determining for himself, each individual, what is right. Why are we surprised that the educational great hope in America has turned out to be the greatest disaster to American culture? James G. Carter, an associate of man's, wrote, and I quote, "As the first object in the formation of every government is to provide for its own preservation, and as the general diffusion of knowledge and virtue is the most effectual, if not the only means of ensuring stability to republican institutions, the policy of the liberal appropriations made by Congress for education in every new state they incorporate is undoubtedly an enlightened policy and worthy of an enlightened free government." Unquote. It is significant that the 10th point of Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto demanded state schools. Marx wrote, and I quote, "Free education for all children in public schools, abolition of children's factory labor in its present form, combination of education with industrial production." Unquote. This is social engineering at its base level. This is how you preserve the state and its ability to control the future. Eventually, this kind of statist philosophy took hold even more so in America, and public school teachers became known as social change agents. The job of the educator was not to educate, but rather become the means to shape the societal mentality in America. This was called by John Dewey, who is often referred to as the father of modern education in America, the self-actualization of the child. That is, the child was not to be taught objective moral standards, but rather allow the child to develop his own way, each child becoming his own governing individual, apart from any objective standard of truth or right. But to what end is the purpose of this social development within the public educational system? George S. Counts, educational professor, writes, quote, "The idea of social education and social pedagogy in its most general form was formulated by Kant, who in his lectures on pedagogy expressed, among other things, the following thought: children must be trained not for the present, but for the future improvement of the human race, and in accordance with some conception of the destiny of mankind." Unquote. Is that destiny the utopian ideal state which cares for every individual from the cradle to the grave? Is this the welfare state which only requires that an individual surrender his rights for security that is offered by that state? Consider this. The invention of kindergarten was designed with the idea of creating a new garden for our young children. It was the new Garden of Eden. Emma Marvidal, who pioneered the kindergarten in California, on her deathbed, exhorted her students by saying to them, quote, "Have faith in the kindergarten. Strive to represent Froebel in his essence. I believe in the power of the kindergarten to reform the world." Unquote. I disagree with Rush Limbaugh when he says, you send your children to public school and they turn their little minds into mush. Not at all. They turn their little minds into humanist, into atheists. They turn their minds against historic American constitutionalism. Public education from its inception was intended to be statist. We've already demonstrated that. And it remains statist to this day. It has even grown in its strength of teaching statism, to the point that our statism is nothing more than a socialism. I thought by now you might recognize what the public schools are. The public schools are the evangelistic arm of the Antichrist. Christians cannot leave their children in the public school system. Its education is religious-based. It is humanistic. And it only differs in content from all other world religions that are man-made. We must first get the federal government out of the education business as an American people if we want to change the future of America. Second, we must then get the state out of education. Finally, when we have privatized all education in America, those privatized systems of education will promote not a statist utopian society, but rather an education of the child that will seek to promote the family, seek to promote what is right and just, seek to promote reading and writing and arithmetic once again, rather than being nothing more than a social engineer run by social change agents. The Princeton theologian A.A. Hodge wrote, and I quote, "I am as sure as I am of Christ's reign that the comprehensive and centralized system of national education, separated from religion, as is now commonly proposed, will prove the most appalling enginery for the propagation of anti-Christian and atheistic unbelief, which this sin-rent world has never seen. It is capable of exact demonstration that if every party in the state has the right of excluding from the public schools whatsoever he does not believe to be true, then he that believes the least must give way to him that believes absolutely nothing, no matter how small a minority the atheist or the agnostics may be. It is self-evident that on this scheme, if it is carried out in all parts of the country, the United States system of national popular education will be the most efficient and wide instrument for the propagation of atheism which the world has ever seen." Unquote. Let me summarize Dr. Hodge. The public school system in America will become, and today has, become the evangelistic arm of the Antichrist. Christianity is not welcome there. Wake up, pastor. Wake up, Christian. Wake up, America. Let us not forget Proverbs 14:34 says, "Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people." And Psalm 9:17 says, "The wicked shall be turned into hell, and all the nations that forget God."